afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here at allpointstv.com, and we're very glad to have you with us this afternoon. We're coming together again on Monday at 2 o'clock, and you can catch us again on WFOV. We're glad to have both audiences with us, as always, and we hope to say a few things here that will be different from what's being said in the mainstream media. We are trying to become mainstream in terms of being out there with the heavyweights, but we're kind of heavyweights in our own right, and we are doing some things here that nobody else is doing, and I think that you'll find that the program today is very different. I want to try to cover some things that tie in with what is happening in Washington right now with the invitation by the Nadler Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, that has invited, of all people, John Dean to testify, and I want to try to tie in why that's taking place and what the game plan is from these people that are not going to give up on this this whole hoax that they're running, because the ultimate goal is to get this president out of power, and it's really a death throw that's taking place between two different groups vying for which one is going to come out on top and which one is going to be the last one standing, because if I'm talking about the deep state on the one hand and the Donald Trump administration and those persons that are standing in the gap at this point on the other hand, and only one can prevail. And if Donald Trump prevails, then all those deep state actors are in trouble. And when I say deep state actors, I'm not talking about the ones behind the scenes in every case. I'm talking about some of the ones that are right in front of us that we cannot see what role they're playing in the deep state apparatus, which consists of really, well, we look at it and we don't see them as the deep state. We see them as part of the apparatus of government. But the deep state is a government in a lot of ways, and we're talking about the intelligence networks, the FBI, the CIA, those actors in the National Intelligence Agency, the NSA, all of these organizations that are set up, really they are set up in opposition to the liberties of the country, and they are standing there stopping anyone from coming into the corridors of power that threaten their interests. And I can talk from the documentation, which I plan to do today. I'm going to read something from the book called Family of Secrets by Russ Baker.
That's something you're bringing up, son. I was just talking about this, a person I know who worked for one of those federal alphabet agencies there. Mm-hmm. And she goes, we're only allowed to do what the Constitution permits us to do. I went, show me where the very existence of your organization is permitted under the Constitution.
Yeah, that's a joke.
It's just show me where it's permitted. Where is the formation? Yeah. We have the post office. We have the right to collect taxes, customs and taxes at the borders or at points of entry. And we have the patent office and the post office, okay? Those three things, other than the other parts of the administration of the government. But where is allowance for these agencies, NSA, the DEA, the BATF? Where are these agencies permitted under the Constitution? I can't see it.
John, the Constitution has been, I think Napolitano's book is appropriate here. These agencies are an indication that the Constitution has been put into exile, and Napolitano wrote a book about it called Constitution in Exile, and I don't necessarily agree with the other title of one of his books about the Constitution, where he says there's constitutional chaos. The chaos is not the Constitution. The chaos is created by those who do not intend to follow the tenets and restraints that are placed upon their power and even their existence by the Constitution. These are anti-constitutional agencies that have been set up. The framers never intended to have a secret police force, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, set up in the 1920s. This is a secret national police force in this country. And then they have other agencies they've set up that are also secretive, such as the FISA Court, Foreign Intelligence Security Agency, in the 1970s under Carter. That was a secret court set up. So when you look in the Constitution where it talks about the creation of the Supreme Court and other inferior courts, they were talking about federal courts. They were not talking about secret courts that are underground bunkers that are in fact making these decisions behind the scenes that are extra constitutional decisions. So we have a lot of things going on here that are going on both in front of the American people's faces and behind their back. And we're going to be trying today to bring some of that into public understandings and the public view. And hopefully we can make it clear here, because there's a lot that you have to research in order to understand what's really going on. Since they brought John Dean up to the committee today, the House Judiciary Committee, and since they have brought a person that was involved in Watergate, one of the major players in Watergate, John Dean, who was the counsel to Richard Nixon, I thought what I would do is read at some length part of the book called Family of Secrets by Russ Baker, and try to show what happened in terms of what I think was another coup d'etat in this country, among several others that we can go and point to, where there was an overthrow of the government of the duly elected government of the United States, and putting in place someone else that was not part of the intended leadership of the country. And I think we have to look at this very carefully, because if we do not, in fact, take this opportunity that we have right now to bring these people to accountability, then these deep state actors that have abdicated the vote of the public on several occasions, that continue to exist behind the scenes, they will go on to do other things that are not intended by the constitutional mandates. And we've got to take this opportunity to stop them, to ferret out who they are, first of all, and then stop them from continuing to do what they've been doing for quite a while now, certainly since 1963, where you had these deep state actors in Dealey Plaza. And that is not to be said lightly. I'm telling you about what the documentation says, and the crime that was committed in Dealey Plaza when a president was assassinated, and the government was in fact installed that was different from the one that was intended by the voters when they went to the polls in 1960. They had installed to some extent, they had installed John F. Kennedy. At least that would be what was decided on the day in which the election was held. A lot of things went on even in that regard, but we had a president that was installed, inaugurated January the 20th of 1961, and that was counsel in Dallas on November the 22nd, 1963. So anyway, we have today, since they brought John Dean up, I wanted to read extensively about the Nixon administration and try to put into context how that plays into what is going on right now with the Trump administration. I think it's part of the same thing. This toppling of the attempted toppling of the Trump administration that goes along with what occurred in 1974 when Richard Nixon's administration was toppled. And I'm gonna read some things here that are gonna hopefully increase the understanding of our of the accepted view of how Nixon was forced out of the White House, because what is in the public view is not what the research shows. In other words, we have a parallax view. We have the view that's been given to the public, and we have one based on the documentation, which I want to read some parts of it to some large extent here. So stay with me for a while. I'll be reading quite a bit from the chapter 10, Downing Nixon, Part 1, The Setup. That's the title of it. So stay with me while I read from this chapter. On June 17, 1972, a group of burglars carrying electronic surveillance equipment was arrested inside the Democratic National Committee office at 2650 Virginia Avenue, Northwest in Washington. The Watergate building complex. The men were quickly identified as having ties to the Nixon re-election campaign and to the White House. Though at the time the incident got little attention, it would snowball into one of the biggest crises in American political history, define Richard Nixon forever and drive him out of the White House. Most historical accounts judge Nixon responsible in some way for the Watergate burglary, or at least for an effort to cover it up. And many people believe Nixon got what he deserved. But like other epic events, Watergate turns out to be an entirely different story than the one we thought we knew. Almost no one has better expressed reason to doubt Nixon's involvement than Nixon himself. In his memoirs, Nixon described how he learned about the burglary while vacationing in Florida from the morning newspaper. He recalled his reaction at the time. It sounded preposterous. Cubans in surgical gloves bugging the DNC. I dismissed it as some sort of prank. The whole thing made no sense. Why, I wondered, why then? Why in such a blundering way? Anyone who knew anything about politics, this is Nixon speaking now from his memoirs, anyone who knew anything about politics would know that a national committee headquarters was a useless place to go for inside information on a presidential campaign. In other words, breaking into a headquarters, what information would you uncover there? The whole thing was so senseless and bungled that it almost looked like some kind of a setup. Nixon was actually suggesting not just a setup, but one intended to harm his administration. Perhaps because anything he might say would seem transparently self-serving, this claim received little attention and has largely been forgotten. Notwithstanding Nixon's initial reaction to the news of the break-in, less than a week later, he suddenly learned more, and this gave him much to ponder. On June 23rd, Nixon's chief of staff, H.R. Haldeman, came into the Oval Office to give the president an update on a variety of topics, including the investigation of the break-in. Haldeman had just been briefed by John Dean, the one that they have invited up to testify before the House Judiciary Committee today, who had gotten his information from the FBI investigation. He quotes Haldeman, "The FBI agents who are working the case at this point feel that's what it is. This is CIA. In other words, the burglary is a CIA operation." Nixon's response would show that he had already realized this. He realized that it was a CIA operation. Nixon, this is quoting Nixon. "Of course, this is a, and he says it twice, E. Howard Hunt operation. An exposure of it will uncover a lot of things. You open that scab, there's a hell of a lot of things, and that's just, we feel that it would be very detrimental to have this thing go any further. This involves these Cubans, Hunt, and a lot of hanky-panky that we have nothing to do with ourselves. This will open the whole Bay of Pigs thing." So they're referring back there to it will open up the Bay of Pigs thing, which would open up the Kennedy thing. Of course, it is important to remember that Nixon knew every word he uttered was being recorded. So we'll take that in consideration. What the author is raising here is that even though this is on the tape, we have to take in consideration and take it with a grain of salt, so to speak, that Nixon may well be saying that because he knows that what is being said is being recorded, and he may well have been doing that to cover up his involvement in the situation here. So I am taking that in consideration, but I want to continue to read here to show that that may be one way of looking at it, but there's some other things we have to consider also. Okay, of course, it is important to remember that Nixon knew every word he uttered was being recorded. Like his predecessors, Kennedy and Johnson, he had decided to install a taping system so that he could maintain a record of his administration. He was, in a way, dictating a file memo for further historians. But that doesn't make everything he said untrue. Even if that were the case, the author is saying that doesn't make everything he said untrue just because he may well be saying it for the fact that it's being recorded. While Nixon undoubtedly spun some things, he still had to communicate with his subordinates. And the tape was rolling while he was trying to run the country. Those were actual meetings and real conversations, tape or no tape. And though the result was 3,700 hours of White House tape recordings, Nixon evinced merely sporadic consciousness of the fact that the tape was rolling. Only after his counsel, John Dean, defected to the prosecutors did Nixon appear to be tailoring his words. After he is now aware that John Dean has turned on him, at that point, maybe more of a tailoring of his words that are being taped is what the author is getting at. Nixon's memoirs, combined with the tape of June 23rd, make clear that Nixon recognized certain things about the implementation of the burglary. The caper was carried out by pros. This is very important here. The caper was carried out by pros, yet paradoxically was amateurish, easily detected. An instigation of the crime more easily pinned on someone else. A break-in at Democratic Party headquarters. On whom would that be blamed? Well, who was running against a Democrat for re-election? Why, Richard Nixon, of course. Nixon was frequently exhibited a grim and self-pitying awareness of how he generally was portrayed, might have grasped how this would play out publicly. Dick Nixon, ruthless, paranoid, vengeful. Tricky Dick. Wouldn't this burglary be just the kind of thing that Dick Nixon, the liberal media's version of him, would do? Nixon's opponent, George McGovern, made this charge repeatedly during the 1972 campaign. Though Nixon would sweep the election, it would become increasingly apparent to him that where Watergate was concerned, the jury was stacked. The path was set. Someone had him in a corner. But who? Many people, including those within Nixon's own base of support, were not happy with him, even from early in his administration. I'm going to skip over to page 203 and read this part. That Nixon could actually have been the victim of Watergate and not the perpetrator will not sit well with many, especially those with a professional stake in Nixon's guilt. Yet 3 of the most thoroughly reported books on Watergate from the past 3 decades have come to the same conclusion that Nixon and or his top aides were indeed set up. Each of these books takes a completely different approach, focuses on different aspects, and relies on essentially different sets of facts and sources. These are, name the books that are taking some exception to the public view. The public view that Nixon planned it, he was in back of it, he sought to cover it up. They're taking some uppance of the public view. Each of these books takes a completely different approach, focuses on different aspects, and relies on essentially different sets of facts and sources. These are 1984's Secret Agenda by former Harper's Magazine Washington editor Jim Haugen, the 1991's publication of Silent Coup by Lynn Colody, Colodny, and Robert Gatlin. They wrote this book, co-wrote this book together, called Silent Coup, and the 2008 publication, The Strong Man, by James Rosen, who used to be on Fox. I don't see him on Fox anymore, and I don't know why he's not there on that network. I don't see him on these on that network, but he was one of the reporters. I think you recall that they went after him during the Obama administration. He had come into some problems during his investigation of some of the things taking place with Barack Obama, who ran one of the most corrupt administrations in American history. I know you don't like me saying that, but I'm saying it because it's true and documented. James Rosen's book, The Strong Man, says the following. John Mitchell and the Secrets of Watergate is a biography of Nixon's close friend, Attorney General, and campaign chief, the highest-ranking official ever to be sentenced to prison. The book, on which Rosen labored for 17 years, is based on sources not previously interviewed and also on unprecedented access to documents generally by the Senate Watergate Committee and Watergate Special Prosecutors. Rosen asserts that the Watergate operation was authorized behind Mitchell's back by his subordinate, Jeb Magruder, and by John Dean, and was deliberately sabotaged in its execution by burglar and former CIA officer James McCord. You know, I have to tell you something. Before I had read this book, which I read this book about 3 weeks ago, I had already concluded that the burglary was in fact sabotaged by someone inside of one of those burglars sabotaged the other four inside of the Watergate. And I had concluded that after having begun my research in 1977. What got me on the path of doing this research is having read H.R. Haldeman's book called The Ends of Power. And that pricked my interest because I had been studying the Kennedy assassination for a number of years. I consider myself to be an expert on what happened in Dealey Plaza, and I know that what they said happened in Dealey Plaza is not what happened. That's a fictional account that had Earl Warren's name on it, but that's not what happened in Dealey Plaza. And anyway, when I began to look at that, I looked at it as an isolated incident, but when I saw that there was another overthrow of the government under Richard Nixon, that pricked my interest in terms of how is it that there is a toppling of the Kennedy administration through assassination, then a toppling of the Nixon administration through another outlet through which a president elected was overthrown. And that got me interested in looking at Watergate and tying Watergate into what happened in Dealey Plaza. Anyway, this book right here kind of verifies what my own research has shown before I read this book. So I'm just really verifying my own research by reading this part here. Rosen asserts in his book called, Rosen's book, The Strong Man. Rosen asserts that the Watergate operation was authorized behind Mitchell's back by his subordinate, Jeb Magruder, and John Dean, and was deliberately sabotaged in its execution by burglar and former CIA officer James McCord. Okay, we're coming up on the break for WFOV, and we will continue on the other side of the break. I want to welcome the persons that will be leaving us for 4 minutes back in that 4-minute time period, and we hope you'll come back to this discussion. I won't be too far away because I'll be still reading from the book, but I know you'll be gone for the next 4 minutes, and we will, in fact, welcome you back after your hiatus is over. Thank you for being here up to this point. Hope you'll come back. Let me continue the reading here with those that are still with us here at allpointstv.com. Mitchell knew, I'm still reading from Rosen's work, Mitchell knew he had been set up. In later years, his mind reeled at the singular confluence of amazing characters that produced Watergate: Dean, Magruder, Liddy, Helms, E. Howard Hunt, McCord, one of the burglars in the Committee of Five that broke into that headquarters. Martinez, another one of the burglars, and also one of the ones in Dealey Plaza, along with E. Howard Hunt, and reckoned himself and the president, neither of whom enjoyed foreknowledge of the Watergate break-in. Let me read that again. Mitchell knew he had been set up. In later years, his mind reeled at the singular confluence of amazing characters that produced Watergate: Dean, Magruder, Liddy, Helms, Hunt, McCord, Martinez, and reckoned himself and the president, neither of whom enjoyed foreknowledge of the Watergate break-in victims in the affair. The more I got into this, Mitchell said in June 1987, the more I see how these sons of, and use that word, have not only done Nixon in, but they've done me in. Rosen also writes, the Watergate tapes unmasked Nixon not as a take-charge boss of a criminal conspiracy, but rather as an agent and confused politician lost in a welter of detail, unable to distinguish his Magruders from his Strzokins. In other words, unable to distinguish his friends from his foe. Paranoid, as a matter of fact, doesn't know who to trust. Someone who knew what and when, what each player had told the grand jury, whose testimony was direct, whose hearsay. My independent research, this is Rosen again, my independent research takes the argument one step further. And the fact in a completely new direction. So looking at Rosen's work, Russ Baker, who's the author of the book called Family of Secrets, he says, my independent research takes the argument of Rosen one step further and the facts in a completely new direction. It leads to an even more disturbing conclusion as to what was really going on and why. This is part here. The accepted narrative of Nixon and as the villain of Watergate is based largely on the work of Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. Okay, want to welcome back WFOV, and I am so glad you're back at this point because we're getting to the very heart of what is to be understood here. Although all of it is important, the real substance is yet to come, so we're just getting to that part right now. Let me read over again what I just read before you came back. The accepted narrative of Nixon, that is the public view of Watergate. Nixon planned it. He was one that was architect of it. The burglary was at his behest. He had ordered it and so on and so forth. That's the accepted version. So the accepted narrative of Nixon as the villain of Watergate is based largely on the work of Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. You know, they are the ones who work with the Washington Post. Look at that again. Work with the Washington Post. the two reporters that did the public investigation and reported in the Washington Post, and that continuation of that story in the news over a 2-year period of time from 1972 to 1974, and then leading to the call for Nixon's impeachment and eventually his resignation. Nixon had to step down because of the pressure that was put on him by the media. Okay, think about this in terms of John Dean again and being invited up to the House Judiciary Committee, because you see I hope you'll see what's going on here, and if not, we'll talk about it at the end of this reading. I do want to make it clear that there is more going on than meets the eye, and there's a non-public part of this narrative, both in the Watergate and also what we're seeing right now with the Donald Trump investigation. In a 2008 interview, Woodward categorically denied having any intelligence connections.
See, he doesn't have any intelligence, but maybe intelligence connections, but...
Yeah, what he's getting at here, this is very important. What he's getting at here is that our media is tied into the intelligence network. In a 2008 interview, Woodward categorically denied having any intelligence connections. He also denied having worked in the White House or providing briefings there. However, journalist Lynn Colodny, Colodny, however, has produced audio tapes of interviews in his Silent Coup. Don't forget that's the book that he wrote, co-authored with Robert Gatlin. Former Defense Secretary Melvin Laird, Pentagon spokesman Jerry Friedland, and even with Woodward's own father, Al, speaking about Bob's White House service. So the denial that Bob Woodward was tied into the intelligence community has been proven to be false. That is major, because what it's showing here is not only were the burglars tied into the intelligence network, but the reporting of it on the other side of the burglary and of the crime, the reporting of it was also, or it also had intelligence connections. And that's what I did not discern at the outset. When I was looking at Watergate, I saw what role was being played by the Washington Post and New York Times. I didn't connect up that the intelligence network, which is involved in the burglary, was also part of the reporting of the burglary. They had it on both sides. That's what they're saying here. It was also the reporting of the Watergate burglary. These persons, the burglary and the reporting of it in the Washington Post, there was collusion going. You're talking about collusion. There was collusion going on both in the burglary and the reporting of it. That's why it stays in the newspaper for 2 years, until the American people caught on that this crime was significant, and it has to do with Richard Nixon, whose administration was brought down by it. Let me turn over to page 206, and I'll read this finally here in this book. Because the public view is not the view based on the research. In September 1971, after 1 year of training at the Maryland-based Sentinel, Woodward was hired at the Watergate. Bob Woodward was hired at the Washington Post. The Post itself is steeped in intelligence connections. Yes, we have a public view, but there's also a view based on the research. And I had said to a lot of people, not through the media necessarily, but in terms of private conversations, what my research has shown. And my research does not disagree with these authors of these books that have written a parallax view of the Watergate burglary that differs from the public view. In other words, the public view is the one that mimics the view that the public has about how President John F. Kennedy was killed. The public view is that one person did all the shooting in Dealey Plaza on November the 22nd, 1963. That's the public view, which the evidence would in fact invalidate that view because of the physical laws in place in Dallas as they are everywhere else, and that is that a body in motion will remain a body at rest and not in motion will remain at rest until interfered with by an outside force. And then it will move in the direction of that outside force. So that if you in fact are hitting an unmovable object from the back, then because the body's at rest, if it's interfered with by an outside force, then if the outside force in the back, it will move in the direction of that force, so that it will do this. It will move this way. I move my hands for those on radio in the direction of the force going forward. So if the body that's in front of the force is at rest and a force in back of it hits it, it will move forward. The bullet's going forward, and the force therefore pushes the unmoving object forward also. That's a physical law, and it's not suspended in Dallas. And you saw the film called put out about the Kennedy assassination, and you saw the film where they have the actor repeating with the fatal shot where it says back and to the left, back and to the left. Kept repeating that because I wanted the viewers to get get to understand that a force cannot interfere with an object that's not moving, and then it moves in the same direction as the force is coming from. You can't have a shot, is what I'm saying, that hits the president from the back in the head, and the president goes to the back where the shot is coming from. Physical laws will not allow that. That can't happen, in other words.
Besides, you can see where part of his skull flies over the back until it lands on the trunk,
Which is being recovered by his wife.
Right. So it would have to come. I've shot. The closest thing I've shot, when you shoot something that's curved and its hard surface is curved. Like I shot one time a old lamp base with a 22 round. 22 is a high velocity, but it's also a pretty small caliber. I hit it at an angle, and it was deflect. I mean, it was actually getting bounced back at me. So I had to take more of a center shot and send it to the center. But when it did go hit and it flew off in the direction of the bullet. It was traveling, not back or not the opposite direction.
Not in the direction where the bullet came from. That is no less the case in Dallas than it would be anywhere else where this would be done. You can have a body moving at the rate of speed that it moved back to the back of that car with a bullet fired from where Oswald supposedly perched on the 6th floor of the school depository in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. It is impossible. Therefore, we had a cover-up of the crime. Because even if you say that Lee Harvey Oswald was one of the shooters, and I do not think that's true. I think the evidence is very clear that he was not one of the shooters. Because in order to be in that lunchroom on the 2nd floor, when one of the officers runs into that building to get to the 6th floor, he goes up on the 2nd floor, running to go to the 6th floor, and he meets Oswald, who's in the cafeteria at that time, who has purchased a Coke. He has a Coke in his hand and is preparing to drink a Coke. I guess having his lunch at that time. We have time the officer going into the school book depository. He's in that building within 90 seconds of that fatal shot being fired. So then Oswald has to come down from the 6th floor, 4 flights to the cafeteria, not out of breath, time to purchase a Coke. At the time that officer comes in there and he wants to find out who that person is. And the person that owned the building identifies him as an employee of that building, working in school depository. So then also proceeds to go up the flight of stairs to the 6th floor. I think Oswald was supposed to have been killed inside that building. I think that the plans were to go in that building, kill Oswald, and that would then be the cover of the crime. But Oswald is on the 2nd floor, and he eventually leaves that building, and he goes to, for some unknown reason, I think I know the reason why he went there, he had been called to go to the Ford Theater. Now, why in the world would those persons that have just now witnessed the president being killed, why would they go in that theater and be looking for the kill of the president in that building? Who had gone in there? The police called because he didn't buy a ticket, 75-cent ticket. He didn't buy the ticket. Went in there without buying a ticket. They called the police because they had him in there. Why would they show up with their guns drawn and then began to make the accusation of he killed the president? And Oswald saying later on he was a patsy. All I'm saying here, and I'm saying exactly what the evidence says, is that there was a conspiracy to kill the president of the United States in this country, and that the conspiracy to kill the president was in fact covered up by the intelligence community. Let me tell the blacks something here, so that you don't think that I'm too far away from things that deal with the black community. I have a book here that I brought to the studio. It's called The FBI and Martin Luther King Jr. On the front cover of the book, it has a comment made by Alden Whitman, and it says, quote, "A shocker and an eye-opener. A conducted tour of an American hell, your FBI at work." And I'll read on page 125 of this book. This is a letter that was written and mailed to Dr. King from the FBI. Signed by someone else, to be sure, but King knew, and so did his aides, they knew that this letter came from the FBI. And here's what the letter said. King, in view of your low grade, I will not dignify your name with either Mr. or a Reverend or a Doctor. And your last name calls to mind only the type of king, such as King Henry VIII. King, look into your heart. You know you are a complete fraud and a great liability to all of us Negroes. White people in this country have enough frauds of their own, but I am sure they don't have one at the time that is anywhere near your equal. You're no clergyman, and you know it. I repeat, you are a colossal fraud and an evil, vicious one at that. You could not believe in God. Clearly, you don't believe in any personal moral principles. King, like all frauds, your end is approaching. You could have been our greatest leader. You, even at an early age, have turned out to be not a leader, but a dissolute, abnormal, moral imbecile. We will now have to depend on our older leaders like Wilkins, a man of character, and thank God we have others like him. But you are done. Your, quote, honorary, unquote, degrees, your Nobel Prize, what a grim farce, and other awards will not save you. King, I repeat, you are done. No person can overcome facts, not even a fraud like yourself. I repeat, no person can argue successfully against facts. You're finished. And some of them to pretend to be ministers of the gospel. Satan could not do more. What incredible evilness. King, you are done. The American public, the church organization that have been helping Protestant, Catholic, and Jews will know you for what you are, an evil, abnormal beast. So will others who have backed you. You are done. King, there's only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You have just 34 days in which to do it. This exact number of days has been selected for a specific reason. It is definite practical significance, and the word significant is deliberately misspelled. They spell it S-I-G-N-I-F-I-C-A-N-T rather than S-I-G-N-I-F-I-C-A-N-C-E, misspelled deliberately because they're trying to act as if this is being written by one of the persons, one a black person's writing this letter. So you see the cover up of that.
I guess they assume that black people have access to dictionaries and when they're in doubt about a word, like any of us would do, right?
Right.
That's kind of an arrogant assumption.
Yeah, the mindset. You see the mindset here. There is but one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, abnormal, fraudulent self is bared to the nation. And those who read this letter and understand the content, they've said that this was the FBI. We know it's from the FBI, but they're saying that the intent of it was to get King to commit suicide. Now, there's another explanation can be given to it as well, and it could have been that King would step down from the SCLC presidency and will ride off in the sunset. That could be another interpretation also. But most persons that read this letter see it as a suicide letter, telling King to kill himself to save face. So that's one way of looking at it. I don't necessarily see it in that vein, or at least I will add, it could have been that King should step down within 34 days. And why 34 days? Because 34 days after the letter had been written, King would have been receiving, in 1964, would have been receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. So maybe it is to, maybe it was leading to, the idea was King to commit suicide, because the same thing occurred with Elijah Muhammad, where Elijah Muhammad was under a lot of stress, and he was saying in the mansion that he was in Arizona, was saying that he was under so much pressure that he thought about taking the easy way out. He had mentioned suicide, and then all of a sudden letters were coming into his home where they were saying, urging him to in fact do so. So I mean, but all I'm doing is raising the other side of it, that it could lend itself to that. It could also lend itself to getting King to step down. But it's not too far beyond being credible that this is a suicide letter. This is a letter that's asking King to take the easy way out and forego any, before he's exposed, forego any further leadership of the civil rights movement. That's our FBI unmasked. And that's what we are looking at in terms of Mueller and Donald Trump and the CIA, the FBI, the National Intelligence Agency, and these other hidden groups that are behind the scenes running this country with the full knowledge and with the approval of those persons like these persons doing this investigation. Nadler, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, these people are trying to topple this administration. And the American people have an opportunity here to stop this, to stop it now. These deep state actors have been at this for a long time, and they've been hiding behind the scenes, and they're now out into the open more than they've been in the past, and it's time to take them on. We have an opportunity, folks. I'm just telling you, we have an opportunity now to take this country back. And you have a once in a lifetime opportunity to do it. If you do not, in fact, take this opportunity and avail yourself in this country of taking this country back, you have lost this country forever, because they will never make this mistake again. They exposed themselves in 2016 because they did not believe that Donald Trump had a shot at the presidency, and so they were talking out in the open to each other, and they left a trail of what they're doing, and they did not expect the outcome. And they are not going to accept the outcome, because the acceptance of it is the ending of them. Because if they do this investigation, if they stop and Donald Trump is left in power, then some folks in the deep state are not only going to be ferreted out, they're going to jail. And they know that, and they know they're in a death fight. That's why Dean is up there today. And that's why the impeachment is going forward. They cannot afford to stop. And they're not going to stop, because Donald Trump has to be outed from office if the deep state is going to survive this. And they know it, and the American people don't know it. So John Dean is up there today in Washington, because they are now trying what they're doing here, and be very clear about it. They're going to now try to show that this is worse than Watergate, and look at how Nixon was forced out, and why, if this is worse than Watergate, why would this man be allowed to stay? John Dean would be up there with no information about this burglary, that the Donald Trump situation. He has no information about that. His role is to connect it to Watergate by his presence sitting up there in front of Nadler's committee. They don't have anything on Donald Trump, and they know it. But they know also that if this man is not taken down, they know that what they're doing in Washington is going to be exposed, because this president did not come through the ranks. This president came from the outside, and he posed a threat inside of the government to them, the vested interests, the deep state actors, which involves your Congress of the United States. Your Congress is part of the deep state. You don't have any representation in Washington, D.C. I'm telling you what I know. They're not representing anybody in Washington. These people are there in the way of what was intended by the framers. They've overthrown this. They've overthrown what was intended by the framers. It's been overthrown. The government of the United States has been captured, and your voice out there as voters, your voice does not even count in this country. If you doubt my word, go and read the book put out by these courageous writers, one of whom is this wonderful professor, Thomas Woods. His latest book is called Nullification. That's it. You need to go read some documents about what was intended by the framers. And I would say the two most important documents in the Federalist Papers, Federalist Paper 10 and Federalist Paper 78. To read those two Federalist Papers will show you how far off we are right now in this country from what was intended. They've overthrown what was intended. And Donald Trump is in there, and they have got to get him out if they're going to continue what they've been doing. He posed a mortal threat to them, and they posed a mortal threat to him also. And so John Dean is there today, but let's understand his presence and what they're trying to do by connecting the Donald Trump situation to Watergate, because they're going to try to now bring about impeachment of this president. So far, the steps are being put in place for that. They're not there yet, but that's what the intention is. That's what the intention is. Okay, we'll talk about it further next week, because I want to talk about impeachment further to let you understand the process. Okay, got to get out of here. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.